Hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing another episode of Free-to-Play Champion Showcase. The winner of the latest poll on my community tab page by 1% was Nekmo Thaar, so that's what we're going to be covering today. But like I said, the difference was 1%, so the runner-up will also be covered in a subsequent video, that being Nishak Vermin Lord. But yes, today our focus is going to be on one of my favorite champions in the game for PvE content, Nekmo Thaar. Super solid. When you think about a Hydra champion, this is definitely the guy that comes to most people's mind, as well as Chimera nowadays as well, but he's useful in a bunch of other areas, pretty much anywhere in PvE content, and potentially PvP as well, depending upon who you happen to have on your account. We'll talk about that a bit later. But yes, Nekmo Thaar, what does he do and what makes him so good? Let's start backwards on him because that makes a little bit more sense relative to his kit. But on the A3 here, it is a 4-turn cooldown, extra turn ability, so it's effectively a 3-turn cooldown, but he will place increased speed on all allies and fill their turn meter by 30%. So this is one of the highest turn meter fill abilities in the game, on top of also providing increased speed for the team. With the extra turn, again, makes it an effective 3-turn cooldown. So Energizer Bunny type energy coming on here when it comes to keeping your team running. On the A2, which will usually follow up after the A3, granted, it gives him the extra turn. It's an AoE attack that has a 100% chance of placing decreased speed, so he's increased speed and decreased speed together, and then the leech as well. So lots of potential there for healing for your team. Chimera Trials come to mind as well, and then just overall utility in Hydra. But it gets even better in my opinion. On the A1, it has a 40% chance of placing decreased attack, but it increases to a 75% chance when targets are under any debuffs. Doesn't have to be his, could be anyone else's. Of course, he brings 2 of his own, so pretty much in most cases, unless you're dealing with the Hydra head, the head of decay right after it cleansed, you have a 75% chance to place decreased attack. So he's decreased attack, decreased speed, and leech, as well as increased attack and increased speed, and the turn meter fill with the extra turn. So super solid champion. But it gets even better on the passive. You just fill his turn meter by 5% every time a debuff on an enemy expires, is removed, or transfers. So feeding once again into the Energizer Bunny type mentality here, where he's getting a lot of turn meter just by the enemies taking their turns effectively and running out debuffs, or a cleanse as well. If the entire enemy team is under a bunch of debuffs and they do a full cleanse, he basically gets a free turn because you've removed a bunch of debuffs, and then he's going to cut in and do one of his abilities. So super solid champion. And yeah, one thing to mention there is that he's really solid. It will come to that when we talk about ways to build him, but because this ability grants him an extra turn, that means he is always AoE attacking. So no matter what ability is, or no matter which ability he uses, he will use the A2 or the A1 after using the A3. So he is always going to attack all enemies every single turn, which is really awesome, and you can take advantage of that. Now, in terms of builds, I'm fortunate enough to have 2 Nekmo Thaars on my account, and I do use them both. They are both effectively fully booked. Obviously, this one's not fully booked here, but you know, who cares about his damage? On the A1, he's not built for damage. But yeah, I do have 2 Nekmo Thaars. They are differently built. I used to use both of them in Hydra. Now I only use one of them in Hydra, which we'll see, and then I use one of them in Chimera. So this is my Chimera focused Nekmo Thaar. So he's built in Relentless. We do want him to get as many turns as possible. We're not capped on turns relative like it is. Well, we are capped in Chimera, but practically speaking, you'll never get there unless you have a Super Senna Androx style of team, but I digress. So he's in Relentless, gets more turns equals everything good that he does. More turn meter fill, more debuffs, more decreased attack, and I paired that with 2 pieces of Impulse, so he has a chance to reduce the cooldowns on top of getting extra speed, so he can again continuously cycle through his abilities, and then 1 piece of Feral is just kind of a bonus for the stats. So this Nekmo Thaar, his total stats are 65,000 on the HP, 3,000 on the attack, don't really care about that, 3,800 on the defense, 280 on the speed, so not crazy fast, but relatively fast for PvE content, and then enough accuracy to lend debuffs against Chimera up and through Ultra Nightmare. So 475 plus, I believe, is the threshold for that one, so that is what he's tuned for. Going through the individual gear pieces here, I am fortunate enough to have an accuracy banner that is refreshed, so every once in a while he can, get a double extra turn from his A3 because it refreshes, and it synergizes of course with the Impulse as well, so got a little bit lucky. But accuracy on the banner with some speed, defense on the amulet with a lot of accuracy. This ring is just Feral, so I threw it on him for the extra accuracy. We got speed on the boots with some defense and some accuracy. We got HP HP on the chest, which is the impulse one, speed and accuracy, perfect roll. I don't think I'm going to get better in the short term for this one, so this is going to be his probably forever chest. On the gloves, we have HP percentage with some speed, some accuracy. On the shield, speed, accuracy with some HP, sensing a theme here. Helmet, speed and accuracy, and then weapon, just speed. I don't have that much impulse. I do need to farm Live Arena a bit more, but I digress. So lots of speed, lots of accuracy, and that's pretty much what gets him going. In terms of a relic, I just have a basic Journal of Necrotos level 2 on him, so the extra in the gemstone for more turn meter effectivity. And then for the blessing on him, I do have the cruelty blessing. Again, he's constantly going to be AoEing, so he's decreasing the defense of whoever he happens to attack. Forgot to mention his aura, but it is speed in all battles, so he can be your aura lead in all of these different types of boss encounters. And then for the masteries, they should be identical, I believe, between the two Nekmo Thars, but pretty much the standard offense tree for PvE content, hugging the entire left-hand side, coming down to War Master. Support tree, it's kind of the standard debuffer, but I opted for the Y split just to get him more turn meter, because obviously his more turn meter synergizes with the entire utility of his kit. But then of course we're banking down through Lore Steel for the extra stats, ending on Sniper and Master Hexer, but notably on him, Cycle of Magic, again synergizing with all the other cooldown reduction effects going on. It can be really useful on him specifically. Switching over to Nekmo 2, this is my, like I said, Hydra specific Nekmo Thaar, so he's in a provoke set with perception. So as I mentioned before, with the constant AoEs in his ability, he works great in a stun set for PvE content. He works great in a provoke set for the Head of Decay. He can work in a cursed set if you want to run him as your Hex champion for your team. So he's really good in any and all of those types of the debuff applying sets that can work specifically in Hydra, but also in other content in general. So I have him in the provoke set specifically for the Head of Decay. In terms of his total stats, 54,000 on the HP, 3,300 on the defense, 268 on the speed, and then 450 on the accuracy, which is overkill. You need about 350 all the way up for a nightmare level of Hydra, but the gear pieces are good, and so his stats are a bit higher. But yeah, he's not as well built as Nekmo 1, as you might be able to tell. But accuracy banner here with some speed, a HP amulet with some accuracy, defense ring with some HP and some defense, speed on the boots with some accuracy, HP on the chest with speed and accuracy, defense on the gloves, speed and accuracy, getting the theme here, speed, accuracy in the taunting set here, speed, accuracy on the helmet, speed, accuracy on the weapon. So yeah, speed, accuracy, same thing as Nekmo 1. He also has a Journal of Necrotos, but this one's just the level 1, but same thing, same gemstone for the turn meter control. He is fully booked. Once again, the cruelty blessing, same logic, and then basically the same masteries. So in terms of the actual showcases, like I mentioned, I use both of these Nekmos in clan boss encounters, so Hydra and Chimera. So let's start with the Nightmare Hydra run that he, or the team that he is on. So I'm going to start this off just so you can kind of see him in action a little bit, but we'll do a quick battle in the end just to get to the end and see the overall damage from this squad. I've showcased the squad before, specifically in the Crowcad champion showcase here, but so if you want to see a little bit more of a deep dive into this exact team composition, you can check out that video up above. But yeah, you can see there we already got lucky. Obviously the provoke set is not 100% chance to place the provoke, so there is some RNG inherently in that, but like I said, he's going to be taking a lot of turns and he's going to be constantly AoEing, so the odds are decent that he is going to provoke. So he is the sole provoker on this team effectively, and so we're hoping that he can kind of keep that head controlled for the most part, but at the end of the day, he really only needs to place it once or twice while the Head of Decay is alive, just because we have a lot of damage between the Ninja and the Mikage with their ally attack synergy, and then as you just saw there, and then the Crowcat and the Packmaster with their ally attack synergy. Most of the heads don't really survive for all that long, so a couple 1 to 2 provokes is usually enough to kind of keep the Head of Decay at bay. So yeah, Nekmo Thaar is a pretty basic champion in terms of his utility, and so you can kind of see he's doing his job. You get decreased speed and leech everywhere. We have a bunch of we have increased speed on our team. We're getting a lot of turn meter fill, and he's just keeping the team running. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's back out and do a quick battle to see the overall damage for this squad. All right, so the quick battle is complete. We made it all the way to the turn limit of 1,000 turns, and we did 747 even million damage. Of course, we are going to be, that damage is dominated by Crowcat here, benefiting from Packmaster and their synergy together, and then Ninja's doing a respectable but notably 100 million less, despite being 6-star crushing rend of a 281 million. And yeah, 65 million on the Shack. Of course, that's benefit from the Hex that he places out there. Rector's doing 2.5, Lady Mikage is doing 4.5, and then Nekmo is doing 5.6. So obviously, he's not a major DPS. He's not going to be doing a ton of damage. He does have War Master, so that is going to add up given the constant AoEs, but his job is to be the enabler and disabler, so to speak, for the team. So disabling the enemies and enabling your team. So he's the engine that keeps the team running ahead of the Hydra heads. Switching over to Chimera, let me run my Nightmare team. I'm not certain that on this rotation, this exact team can one key on Ultra Nightmare. I will be testing that a little bit later, but because I know that we can definitely one key on Nightmare, we're going to be running that team instead. So this team is a pretty basic concept of a team. We have our, protection set, champion, cleanser, reviver for the squad. In this case, I'm using Elva Autumnborn. That could be Pythion if you have done his fusion in the past, or you have Elva. I think she's kind of objectively the best one for trials, given like the veiling and whatnot. But Lydia, of course, the quintessential debuffer, and then we have Nekmo Thaar in there as our kind of trial demon, but also for the same reason, he's the Energizer Bunny of the squad, keeping the team running. And then we're filling in the DPS. One is Marius, of course, because he's just that powerful, and then the other is Harima, because she synergizes decently with Marius, of course, but mainly for, I just don't have a good like force affinity, enemy max HP, multi-hit type champion. Obviously I run Newt on rotation 1, and then I run like a Ninja Mikage when it's favorable for his affinities. So this is kind of the odd one out in terms of the rotations, where I don't really have a champion like a Wallmaster Atharion who is force affinity or something like that. But anyways, just like with Hydra Clan Boss, it's pretty self-explanatory what Nekmo Thaar can do for the squad. So let's just take a quick look ahead and talk about the trials that he's independently good for. So the Ram form, he's not the most useful there, but notably having Leech out there, especially if you can combine it with a Fear from Lydia's A1, that means that your champions have a chance to heal themselves when they attack him. And so as long as you have that combination, they still will probably net take damage overall, but they might not be able to just instantly die because they can heal themselves a little bit from that. But he definitely comes into his own on form, or on lion form. You can see there is directly a trial there for doing damage while the Chimera is under Leech, which of course he enables. And then it just switches, I guess, to the active one. I don't think there's anything, or I guess, yeah, this trial here on trial 2 on lion form. Once you get past trial 1, then you have the decreased speed that he's bringing. Marius brings the increased defense. We don't care about that one. For the Viper form, he is your increased speed champion, and then he's also your decreased attack champion. So he's enabling this trial here on the Viper form, and I think that's basically it in terms of the trials that he directly involves himself in. But again, he's just an overall good champion to have on your team and to keep the motor running. But he's not required. I think nowadays there's a lot of different Chimera champions, Chimera specific champions that can kind of do some work, or a lot better of a job, or not better of a job necessarily, but they can do a decent job of kind of competing with his niche in that regard, as being the kind of the engine that runs this team, and or the champion that enables a decent amount of trials single-handedly. All right, so I'm coming to you back near the end of the fight, the second Viper form, and this is a good opportunity to point out that, some rotations of Chimera are going to be anti-affinity relative to Nekmo Thaar. Of course, he is a spirit affinity champion, so he can weak hit. So one option for another way that you could build him, at least you could change him into, obviously with free gear removal, this is more viable nowadays, but you could build him in some sort of affinity breaker set. Obviously, you would be sacrificing Relentless, but you could build him in, say, for example, 4-piece Merciless, 4-piece Affinity Breaker to reduce the cooldowns when he attacks, or you could build him in 4-piece Affinity Breaker with 2 pieces of Impulse to kind of get some of that effect back. So that is an opportunity for some, relative efficiency relative to the anti-affinity potential matchups here. I find, at least for me, my purposes, I like the Relentless Impulse builds. You can see they're kind of going ham a little bit there with the extra turns, but I kind of just prefer to have him take more turns, and then he'll eventually come back to around to where he doesn't weak hit. That is my strategy, but depending upon how you want to run your account, you could opt to change the build accordingly. Now, this particular team is not focused so much on like maximizing trials. It's more focused on getting the 1 key for the stages, and so you can see we're gonna do probably maybe 120-ish million damage or so, and you can see that we got 6 trials done. So let's kind of highlight a couple of those. This team in particular particular is not really built to handle the ram form, so that's kind of irrelevant there. We did 0 draws on that one, but we did kind of do what we expect to do on the lion form. We got the Marius one because he placed increased defense. We got this one just doing damage more or less. This is one that Nekmo helped us get the 2 million damage when he's under decreased speed, decreased defense, as well as the leech one. So there's 2 trials that he helped us with. And then on the Viper form, decreased attack, once again increased speed. Obviously Elva also brings increased speed, as well as Lydia, so it's a little bit redundant there, but the decreased attack is unique to him unless Harima happens to place it. And then on easy, we're just doing damage with the block active skills. But still, having one champion who is single-handedly enabling your team to do 3 trials is pretty darn useful and pretty substantial. And that is, of course, why Nekmo Thaar is so popular for, I guess for auto-friendly teams, as you can see here, basically kind of just chilling and letting the team run. In this case, for Nightmare, I do like pause it before the Viper form, just to make sure we don't give the Viper form increased accuracy, then it places a bunch of poisons, everyone dies, etc. And Elva has her cleanse ready, Lydia's ready with the block active skills and whatnot. So there's a little bit of semi-manual going on for specifically Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare when I run them. But in general, if you have a team in this kind of framework, you can be relatively comfortable running them full auto. So yeah, as expected, just over 120 million damage on this team, 80 million from Marius, and then 35 from Harima. And then once again, a little bit of damage from Nekmo Thaar, Warmaster being the main culprit there, 4.6, 2.8 from Lydia. But again, he's not really meant to be the damage dealer for your squad. You're not going to see his contribution here on the stat sheet, but you can think of it this way: is having him in a good build, having him fast means that Marius, instead of compared to otherwise, he got, let's say, 4 more enemy max HP hits off, which could be millions and millions of damage. Or same thing, Harima got more turns. Or in the case of like Ram form, maybe Elva got 1 extra or 2 extra turns relative to the Chimera clan boss and was able to revive someone a bit sooner. So he's kind of just the engine running behind the scenes for the team. So in terms of other areas of the game where you can use Nekmo Thaar, he's not much of a dungeon champion, but notably he does have decreased speed, so he could be kind of fun in some sort of Iron Twins comp, but he's not really built for dungeons. I think you could fit him in there, of course, if you have to pull him, relatively early on, but that's not his core role. He's of course going to be helpful in faction wars. Again, not the most useful, but if you wanted to run him in a stun set, he's always going to be AoEing, so that could be handy depending upon the use case, or he could just be helpful to keep your team running and potentially, allowing your DPS to heal when he places the leeches out there. When it comes to arena, you don't think of him traditionally as an arena champion, but for those few people who have Teox, he is basically your only option outside of Lazarius for being a lizard man, a faction unity type a team that where you can build him super fast, just like you would build an Arbiter. He has one of the best turn meter fills in the game, as we already talked about, 30% increased speed. It helps you go even faster with that on, and so he can enable some sort of fun Teox lizard man team composition in arena. Granted, that's not as meta as it used to be when Teox first came out, but nonetheless an honorable mention to his utility potential in the arena in that niche. We talked about him against the various clan bosses. He can be helpful in the Doom Tower. I want to say specifically like Dark Fae comes to mind, where he's kind of pops off in terms of utility. Same thing, keeping your team running, keeping your team ahead of the mirror copies, decrease speed, slowing the boss down, and then decrease attack in case he gets a turn. He can decrease the damage that you would take. Curse City, basically the same logic as Faction Wars. You could run him in a stun set or just use him in some Lizard Man stuff. And then Siege, just like we talked about with the arena, you could run him in some sort of Lizard Man only post or something like that with the Teox or some other faction unity stuff, or just faction Lizardman faction champions going on there. So he can be useful in the arena, albeit a little bit more niche. So there you have it. That's going to conclude the free play champion showcase for Nekmo Thaar. We covered 2 different ways to build him, but highlighted many other ways you could have built him on your account, and highlighted the main 2 areas where he services on my account. Like I said, he's definitely one of my favorite champions. And as soon as he came out, he came out, back when Hydra was a little bit more the focus of people as a gameplay. But yeah, I wanted him as soon as he came out. I didn't have enough sacreds to get him when he had his initial guaranteed. I think it was 15 back at that time. And yeah, I just literally didn't have enough. Otherwise, I would have gone for it. And I just got lucky in the future to pull 1 and also 2. And so yeah, I did, like I said before, I used them both in Hydra for a very, very long time. So that if you have multiple, feel free to use them. Don't feel bad. But ideally, you want to get to the setup where either you have one optimized, depending upon how endgame you are. You definitely want to have one more optimized for Chimera, just because of his utility there. And if you happen to have 2, then that frees up the other one to be focused more so on Hydra. That being said, though, specific to Hydra, just keep in mind that if you're super endgame, the decreased speed aspect of his kit is a little bit less important if you have a really high damage comp that's constantly killing the heads, because having the heads respawn with the Serpent's Will buff and putting decreased speed on them means that you're wasting a lot of turns dealing 0 damage just because of how that buff works. So there could be some reason to kind of pull him back from certain team compositions, depending upon, of course, your roster who you have on your account and what team is around or formerly was around him. As always, the champions selected for the free-to-play champion showcase are voted by you guys, my lovely viewers. So on my community tab page, there will be a new poll asking you guys which of the 4 champions you'd like to see a showcase on next. If you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit the like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.